The sound that came from my throat wasn't quite human when my wife introduced her lover to our son at his high school graduation. "Daniel, honey, this is David," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the gymnasium chatter like a scalpel through skin. "He's going to be your new stepdad." The folding chair beneath me creaked as every muscle in my body went rigid. Around us, other parents were hugging their kids, taking photos, celebrating futures. But my world had just collapsed into a singularity of rage, so pure I could taste copper in my mouth. Our son stood frozen in his cap and gown, his face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and something that looked like grief. David, tall, cocky, with the kind of smile that suggested he'd never been punched hard enough, extended his hand toward Daniel. "Hey there, champ," David said. "Your mom's told me so much about you." The gymnasium's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone's baby was crying. The principal was still droning through names at the podium. Life was continuing as if my marriage hadn't just been publicly executed. I stood up slowly, my hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Victoria's eyes found mine across the small circle we'd formed, and for just a moment, her confident mask slipped. She'd expected screaming, maybe violence. Instead, she got something far more dangerous: calculation. "David," I said, extending my own hand. My voice came out level, almost friendly. "Alexander Grant. Welcome to the family." His grip was firm but sweaty. I squeezed just hard enough to make him wonder if I was trying to break something. "Thanks, man," he said. "Victoria's told me a lot about you, too." "I bet she has." I released his hand and turned to my wife. 22 years of marriage had taught me to read her tells, the way she touched her earring when she lied, how her left eye twitched when she was nervous. Right now, she was doing both. "We should talk later," I said to her. "All of us, like a family." The word family came out like broken glass. Victoria flinched. "Of course," she said, but her voice had lost some of its earlier bravado. "We have a lot to figure out." Daniel cleared his throat. "Can we maybe not do this here?" His voice was tight, controlled. My boy had inherited my ability to compartmentalize under pressure. "You're absolutely right," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. "This is your day." "Congratulations, son. Your mother and I are both proud of you." The emphasis on both wasn't lost on anyone in our little circle. Victoria's jaw tightened. David shifted uncomfortably. "Thanks, Dad," Daniel said quietly. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. I smiled when I was supposed to smile, clapped when I was supposed to clap, and posed for photos when Victoria shoved her phone in my direction. But my mind was elsewhere, already 3 moves ahead in a game my wife didn't realize we were playing. Victoria rode with David, smart move on her part. She knew I'd have questions she wasn't ready to answer yet. I followed their silver Mercedes in my truck, watching David's head bob as he talked animatedly. Probably telling her how well that went, how I was taking it like a good little cuckold. He had no idea what was coming. My phone buzzed at a red light. Text from Daniel. "Can I come home with you tonight? Need some space to think." I typed back, "Always. Your room's ready." The light turned green. David's car took the exit toward the expensive part of town where Victoria had apparently set up her new life. I kept driving straight toward our house. My house, legally speaking, though I suspected that was about to become complicated. 20 minutes later, Daniel's friend Jake dropped him off in my driveway. My son looked older somehow, like the last 2 hours had aged him a couple years. He was still wearing his cap and gown. "You want to talk about it?" I asked as we walked inside. "Not really," he said. "At least not yet. Is it okay if I just exist here for a while?" "As long as you need." He nodded and headed upstairs. I heard his bedroom door close with the soft click of someone who didn't want to slam it, but needed the barrier anyway. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my study, staring at my laptop screen. There were things I needed to know, and I needed to know them fast. Victoria wasn't the type to make impulsive decisions. This had been planned. Which meant David wasn't just some rebound. He was an investment. I opened a new browser window and typed his name into Google. David Morrison, 43, divorced, worked in commercial real estate. Lived in a condo downtown that probably cost more than my annual salary. No kids of his own. Interesting. My phone rang. Victoria's number. "We need to meet," she said without preamble. "Tomorrow. To discuss arrangements." Arrangements. I kept my voice neutral. That's an interesting word choice. Don't be difficult, Alex. This doesn't have to be ugly. No, it doesn't. But that's up to you, isn't it? A pause. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm curious about your timeline, Victoria. When exactly did you decide our marriage was over? Before or after you started sleeping with David? That's crude, accurate, both? I'm hanging up. Go ahead. But we are having this conversation. Tomorrow, like you said. My lawyer's office, 2 o'clock, Peter Thorne on 5th Street. Come alone. I ended the call before she could respond. Peter Thorne looked like what you'd get if you crossed a shark with an accountant. Expensive suit, dead eyes, and a reputation for leaving opposing counsel in tears. I'd retained him 6 months ago when I first started suspecting Victoria was cheating. "How much do you have?" he asked, sliding a thick folder across his desk. "Enough," I said, opening it. "But I want more." The folder contained photographs, bank statements, hotel receipts, and phone records. All perfectly legal to obtain, all devastating to Victoria's narrative that this was a recent development. The earliest evidence went back 8 months. "She's been moving money," Peter said, pointing to a series of bank transfers. "Small amounts but consistent. Building a nest egg." "Where?" "Account in her maiden name. Different bank. She's been clever about it. Nothing that would trigger automatic reporting." I studied the photographs. Victoria and David at restaurants, walking into hotels, standing very close in parking lots. The kind of images that told a story without needing captions. "The private investigator wants to keep going," Peter said. "He thinks there's more to find." "Tell him yes. And tell him I want to know everything about David Morrison. Financials, employment history, previous relationships, everything." "Alex," Peter leaned back in his chair. "What exactly are you planning here?" "Justice," I said, "and maybe a little theater." He smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I like theater. Victoria arrived at Peter's office 15 minutes late, which was unusual for her. She prided herself on punctuality. David wasn't with her, which was smart. This conversation was going to be difficult enough without an audience. She sat across from me in one of Peter's client chairs, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. She was wearing the blue dress she'd bought for our anniversary last year. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. "So," she said, crossing her legs, "what are your terms?" "Terms?" I laughed. "Victoria, you seem to be under the impression that you're negotiating from a position of strength." Peter slid a copy of the evidence folder across the table. Victoria opened it, and I watched her face cycle through surprise, anger, and what might have been fear. "You had me followed," she said flatly. "I had my suspicions confirmed," I corrected. "There's a difference." She flipped through the photographs, her jaw getting tighter with each page. When she reached the bank statements, she closed the folder. "What do you want?" she asked. "Full custody of Daniel, the house. My pension stays intact, and you pay your own legal fees." "That's insane. Daniel needs his mother. Daniel needs stability and honesty, neither of which you've provided lately." Victoria turned to Peter. "This is harassment. These photographs were taken without my consent." "In public places," Peter said mildly, "perfectly legal and admissible in court." She stood up abruptly. "I need to think about this." Take your time, I said. But understand that every day you wait, my investigator finds more. Yesterday, he discovered that David's been married twice before. Both ended in adultery. Today, he's looking into that commercial real estate deal David closed last month. The one where the seller was a woman he'd been seeing. Victoria's face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? I opened my phone and showed her a text from the private investigator. Morrison pattern confirmed. We'll have full report by end of week. She stared at the phone for a long moment, then grabbed her purse and walked out without another word. Think she'll take the deal? Peter asked after the door closed. No, I said. She'll fight. Which means we get to show everyone exactly what kind of person she really is. The retaliation started 2 days later. I came home from work to find Daniel sitting on the front steps, his duffel bag beside him. His face was red, and he looked like he'd been crying. What happened? I asked. Mom showed up at Jake's house while we were hanging out, he said. Made a huge scene in front of all my friends. Told everyone you were trying to turn me against her. Said you were mentally unstable and that she was worried about my safety. My hands clenched into fists. In front of your friends? In front of everyone. Jake's parents, his little sister, half the guys from the basketball team. It was humiliating, Dad. I sat down beside him on the step. I'm sorry, son. This isn't your fault. Is it true? About her and David? I considered lying, protecting him from the ugly details. But Daniel was 18 now, legally an adult, and he deserved the truth. Yes, I said. It's been going on for months. He nodded like he'd suspected as much. She wants me to give you a message. She said to tell you that if you don't stop this, she'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. And what kind of man is that? I don't know. She wouldn't say. But Dad? He looked at me with eyes that had too much knowledge for an 18-year-old. Whatever she's planning, don't let her win. She's not the person I thought she was. That night, after Daniel went to bed, I got a phone call from my boss. Alex, we need to talk, he said. Tomorrow morning, first thing. What's this about, Tom? I'd rather discuss it in person. But Alex, you might want to bring a union representative. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, already knowing what Victoria had done. The meeting with my boss went exactly as I'd expected. Someone had called the company's HR department with allegations about my mental instability and violent tendencies. Anonymous, of course, but detailed enough to require investigation. I spent 3 hours in a conference room with Tom, the HR director, and a union rep, explaining that I was going through a contentious divorce and that my wife was engaging in character assassination. We have to take these allegations seriously, the HR director said. You understand that, right? Of course, I said. I assume you'll want documentation proving these are false accusations? I handed her a folder containing my own evidence. Phone records showing the timing of Victoria's call to HR right after our meeting with Peter, copies of the divorce filings, showing her infidelity, and a sworn statement from Daniel about Victoria's behavior at his school. This is comprehensive, she said, flipping through the documents. I believe in thorough documentation, I said, especially when someone's trying to destroy my reputation. Tom leaned forward. Alex, I've known you for 12 years. This doesn't sound like you, but I have to ask, are you planning any kind of retaliation against your wife? Nothing illegal, I said, but I'm not going to roll over and let her destroy my life because she decided to upgrade husbands. The investigation was dropped by the end of the week. My job was safe, but the damage was done. Everyone in the office knew about my situation. The whispers followed me down hallways. It was time to change the rules of engagement. I hired a second private investigator. If Victoria wanted to play dirty, she was about to learn that I'd been playing this game a lot longer than she had. The first investigator focused on building the legal case. The second one, A woman named Sarah, who specialized in corporate espionage, focused on David Morrison's business dealings. What she found was beautiful. David's real estate company was involved in a complex fraud scheme involving inflated property values and kickbacks to city planning officials. Nothing that would put him in prison, but enough to destroy his professional reputation and trigger a federal audit of his finances. "How do you want to use this?" Sarah asked, sliding a USB drive across the table at our meeting in a downtown coffee shop. "Carefully," I said, "and at exactly the right moment." Meanwhile, Victoria was escalating her own campaign. Anonymous letters to my neighbors about property values dropping due to domestic disputes. Calls to Daniel's college, where he had just enrolled, asking whether his tuition was being paid for with stolen money. She even had David show up at my workplace, ostensibly to discuss family matters, but really to intimidate me. David cornered me in the parking lot after work on a Friday evening. He'd been waiting by my truck, smoking a cigarette like he owned the place. "We need to talk," he said. "Do we?" I unlocked my truck door but didn't get in. "About what?" "About you backing off. Victoria's had enough of your games." I smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression. "Games?" "David, you have no idea what games look like." "I'm serious, Alex. This stops now or things are going to get unpleasant." Unpleasant. I tested the word like I was tasting wine. That's interesting, coming from a man who's been fucking another man's wife for 8 months. His face flushed. "Victoria's filing for a restraining order. Harassment, stalking, threatening behavior. How's that going to look at work?" "About as good as your federal audit's going to look to your clients." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" "Ask your accountant," I said, getting into my truck. "And David? Next time you want to threaten me, bring more than a cigarette and an attitude." I drove away, leaving him standing in the parking lot like a scarecrow in an expensive suit. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in family court. Victoria's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman who specialized in high-conflict divorces, painted me as an unstable stalker who was harassing his innocent ex-wife and her new partner. Peter let her talk. He took notes, nodded occasionally, and never objected to anything she said. When it was our turn, he stood up with the calm confidence of a man holding 4 aces. "Your Honor," he began, "Mr. Grant is indeed guilty of monitoring his wife's activities, but not harassment, due diligence. He presented our evidence methodically, the timeline of Victoria's affair, the secret bank accounts, the attempts to destroy my reputation and career, David's business problems, and his pattern of targeting married women. Furthermore," Peter continued, "Mrs. Grant's request for a restraining order was filed on the same day that Mr. Morrison received notification of a federal audit into his business practices. The timing suggests this is an attempt to prevent legitimate investigation into financial assets that may be community property." Victoria's lawyer tried to object, but the judge was already looking at the evidence. By the time Peter finished, Victoria was crying, not from grief, but from rage. The restraining order was denied. "However," the judge said, looking directly at me, "Mr. Grant, I want to be clear that any actual harassment will result in serious consequences. Keep your investigation legal and professional." "Understood, Your Honor," I said. Outside the courthouse, Victoria cornered me while David waited by their car, talking frantically on his phone. "This isn't over," she said through gritted teeth. "You're right," I said. "It's not." The end came faster than I'd expected. David's federal audit triggered an investigation into city planning corruption that made the local news. His photo appeared on the evening broadcast as a person of interest in a real estate fraud case. By morning, 3 of his major clients had fired him. Victoria tried to distance herself, but Sarah had documented every expensive dinner, every weekend trip, every piece of jewelry David had bought with money that might not have been legitimately earned. The divorce proceedings became a formality. Victoria's lawyer advised her to take my original offer: full custody to me, house stays with me, no alimony. The alternative was having all of David's financial irregularities exposed during a contested divorce, which would make her an accessory in the public mind, if not legally. She signed the papers on a Friday afternoon in Peter's office. She didn't speak to me, didn't look at me, just signed her name with sharp, angry strokes. "One more thing," I said as she gathered her purse to leave. She paused, hand on the door handle. "Daniel's graduation party is this weekend. He specifically requested that you not bring David. I think that's reasonable, don't you?" Her shoulders sagged slightly. "Fine. And Victoria?" I waited until she turned around. "If you ever try to use our son as a weapon against me again, I'll make what happened to David look like a love letter. Are we clear?" She nodded once and left. Peter leaned back in his chair. "Remind me never to piss you off." "Justice isn't always pretty," I said, "but it's always satisfying." The divorce was finalized just as Daniel was preparing to leave for college in the fall. We had a quiet celebration dinner, just the two of us, the night before he left for his freshman year. "You sure you're going to be okay on your own?" he asked as we finished dessert. "I think I'll manage," I said. "You focus on your studies." This mess is behind us now. 3 months into his first semester, I sat on my back porch with a beer and my phone, scrolling through the news articles about David's legal troubles. The photos showed him leaving court looking haggard and defeated. Victoria had texted once during the party, "You destroyed him." I'd typed back, "He destroyed himself." I just made sure everyone knew about it. She hadn't responded. My phone buzzed with a new message. This one was from Daniel. "Thanks for not letting her win." I smiled and typed back, "Thank you for choosing to stay with me." The response came immediately. "Where else would I go? You're my dad." 3 months later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Victoria and David, despite everything, were getting married. The ceremony would be small, private, family only. I threw the invitation in the trash without opening it fully, but not before I noticed the return address. They were living in a small apartment across town now. David's condo had been seized as part of the federal investigation. Justice, as I'd told Peter, wasn't always pretty, but it was always satisfying. The doorbell rang on a cold December evening. Daniel stood on my porch, home for winter break, looking taller and more confident than when he'd left for college in August. "Hey, Dad," he said, dropping his duffel bag and giving me a hug. "I'm home." "Welcome back, son," I said. "How was school?" "Good. Really good. I'm changing my major to criminal justice." I raised an eyebrow. "Any particular reason?" He grinned, the same smile he'd inherited from me. "Turns out I like seeing justice served. Wonder where I got that from." Inside the house, the phone was ringing. I ignored it. Whatever it was could wait. My son was home, my life was my own again, and for the first time in over a year, everything was exactly where it should be.